if we take a more historical perspective, in a lot of ways, this proposed vision for the higher potential of the profession over the next 20 years is actually a return in many ways to the role the profession was optimized for over 100 years ago. So in this quote from the book A Whole New Engineer by David Goldberg and Mark Somersville, they talk about how the Society of the Promotion of Engineering Education, which was formed after the 1893 World's Fair, in the formation of that society, it was widely acknowledged that to study engineering was to be at the cutting edge of social and technological change. So the socio-technological change that we've been talking about in the previous videos. In this other book called The Revolt of the Engineers by Edwin Layton, which tells the history of the engineering profession in the United States in the late 1800s and through to the mid-1900s, it tells the story of actually an epic battle within the engineering profession between one camp that sort of saw engineers, the engineering profession as a natural counterbalance to corporate excess as the rise of corporate capitalism was sweeping across the US and the planet. And another camp that actually saw the path forward of engineers of becoming almost the special kind of corporate man. And it was mostly men, obviously, back in those days. So this quote from this book: "The promise of a lucrative career in business does much to ensure the loyalty of engineering staff. Conversely, it undermines engineers' identification with the profession. Business makes engineering a phase in a successful career rather than a career in itself." So this was leaders of the day sort of talking about feeling that context change of the rise of corporate capitalism shifting the very sort of foundations of the profession underneath their feet. So if we were actually to plot this on the earlier graphic, you can actually plot the shift in focal point of the profession from the 1900s through the 1950s to today, and then you can look at the shift that they were talking about and proposing for the next 20 years. So in the 1900s, early 1900s, at the turn of the century, as per the previous quotes, it was widely recognized that engineers were at the central point of socio-technological leadership. Then, as the Revolt of the Engineers book tells the story, the rise of corporate capitalism, that big context shift, basically pushed the engineering profession into more the role of technical expert. Now, I would say in that time period, engineers were still closer to the cutting edge of new technologies. In fact, in 1918, there was actually a debate around whether or not electrical should be considered a new form of engineering, because it was so different than civil and mechanical and mining and the more traditional forms of engineering. The positive argument won out, and electrical became a foundational type of engineering. And if you remember back to the talk about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, this was at a time when electrification was driving the Second Industrial Revolution. So at that time, engineers were still very much at the forefront of cutting-edge technologies. It could be argued that between 1950 and today, not only have we been playing more of the technological expert role as opposed to the socio-technological leader, but in a lot of ways we've arguably been falling behind in terms of cutting-edge technologies, and we've been closer to established technologies. You can see that when you consider that the Third and Fourth Industrial Revolution around sort of computer science, computer engineering in the Third Industrial Revolution, but now around artificial intelligence and nanotechnology and Internet of Things, and ask the question, to what extent is the engineering profession at the center of providing value around the application of those, the design and application of those new technologies? So this shift back that we're proposing over the next 20 years in the role of the profession is actually in many ways a return back to where the profession was over 100 years ago. But of course, it's not a return back to exactly the same place, because the world has moved on and the relationship between technology and society is much different than it was at the turn of the last century. And so what we have here actually is a return to sort of the role relative to technology and society and other players, as opposed to the exact same place. Now, what actually causes these role shifts over time, and what agency do we have over them? There are two sort of major factors. One is the changing context, as we've talked about the rise in corporate capitalism, the changes in technology itself. And the other is our decisions as leaders. Our decisions today about what we choose to do, and the decisions of leaders who came before us, who decided to either resist or capitalize on some of these context changes.